Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I am joined by Vera, and today we are going to be talking about 10 tropes in science fiction and fantasy that really just get on our nerves, that annoy us, that we would rather not see done in media that we consume. These tropes are going to range from things that are just kind of annoyances, more kind of preferences, to things that we think just entirely break a story, kill tension, all of that sort of stuff. So, with all of that being said, Vera, what is the first annoying trope that you have listed down for us?
The first trope that I have is, and I'm so sorry to all my animal lovers. I'm one of you as well, don't get me wrong. But sometimes animal companions in books they really don't work for me because I feel like sometimes the author just introduces an animal companion instead, and since it's, oh, look, it's a cute animal, people are just supposed to care for it, instead of building any sort of meaningful character relationships or whatever. I don't know, it just feels like a cop out sometimes, and I've seen them done so many times, and I'm like, come on, can we get something new, please?
That makes sense. The first thing that kind of came to mind when you said that is a very unfortunate trope in a lot of stories is introducing an animal companion so then that animal can be killed off as a way to just
Exactly.
cause emotional
Exactly.
trauma.
And that's exactly what it is. It's just emotional trauma. And it's cheap. I'm sorry, it's cheap. Whenever there's like a cute animal introduced, I know something's gonna go wrong with the animal. And again, not always, but too often for I'm just a girl. I can't handle my animals dying. So and it's cheap. So
Oh no.
less,
I
please.
I would agree with that one, because my mind immediately goes to, I won't say specifically, but in Neverending Story, if you watched that movie as a child, then you were probably traumatized like me because of this very trope that Vera is talking about. And I have never forgiven that movie because of what it did.
Yeah, like don't get me wrong, animal companions can be done well. Um, for example, I am currently reading Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, and it didn't do it well at the start. It really annoyed me, but but now later on, now that I'm over halfway in the book, it's starting to grow on me a little bit. So, and I have a lot of faith in the animal companion as well because it's on all the covers. It's in a lot of the fan art. So clearly, it's a fan favorite. When I was younger, I loved Aragon. And so Fiernan, I think, was the green dragon, and I really liked Fiernan the green dragon. But I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, I don't want any more animal companions. It's an animal. It's just written down. It's not the
Hmm.
actual animal. So, I still have to imagine it.
Yeah, and there's also, unless you have something like Aragon where they can communicate with their animal, there's usually not that much characterization you can give to an animal companion because it is an animal, unless you do something more kind of magical to kind of spice things up. I'll tell you what, though, we need more examples of, like, a good example of this is in Lord of the Rings, where they get to the Mines of Moria and Sam tells Bill the pony to go home, and Bill the pony goes home and he doesn't have to go through the mines of Moria where he probably would have died. So it's a good example of one done well.
Actually, speaking of horses, Bella from Wheel of Time,
Mm,
my queen. She was the true hero of that story, in my opinion. Yeah, I really liked Bella, but she wasn't like too main of a character, she just appeared here and there, and whenever she appeared, I was like, can't believe she is still here, but I'm glad. I'm glad she's here. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe the exception to the rule is if, yeah, there's some sort of character work done between the character and the animal companion via magical intervention so that they can talk or whatever, or if they're like a secondary character animal companion. Maybe I don't know. Maybe that's how it's gonna work for me, but I don't know.
that makes sense. Yeah, and I think as long as you're not using them for cheap emotional kind of tricks on the audience or the reader, then it can be done well. But I think that seems to be the big thing we take issue with there when animal companions get involved.
Yeah. Anyways, Thomas, what about you? What's your first trope that you want to discuss?
So this was an interesting one because it's in a lot of stories that I enjoy, but it's something I've gotten a little bit of tired of. I wrote down evil empires. And the reason I wrote that down is because I've seen too many stories at this point where the main villainous force is an entire country of people who are just all evil. Where the whole empire, the whole kingdom, the whole nation is just the bad guy kingdom. And I've gotten to the point where I don't like that because to me it removes nuance of like even in real world conflict, when you have these two opposing sides, we may agree, that a certain government or leader is bad, but that doesn't mean every single person in that country is this brainwashed, indoctrinated, like is fully on board with everything that's happening. And yet I feel like you see in so many fantasy and sci-fi, these just the whole country is evil. They're just all evil. They're just all brainwashed, and I just don't find that very realistic or very compelling. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, no matter if it's a very good government or a very bad government or whatever, you're always going to have people that agree or disagree, whether it's because I don't know, there's been propaganda and they've been convinced to follow this evil government or whatever, or if it's just that, I don't know, they've been misled that a good government is actually really evil or whatever. It's all in varying shades of gray. And yeah, man, I really don't like it when, especially, when this really makes me angry, especially when we as the reader don't understand or aren't given a good explanation for why do these people follow this evil empire.
Hmm.
Have you read The Wheel of Time actually?
I've only read the first couple of books, unfortunately.
Okay, that's fine. But I feel like this isn't a spoiler, so don't worry about it. But even though I found the dark friends that follow the dark one to sometimes
Mhm.
be comically evil, at least there's an explanation given for why people do turn to the Dark One, and the answer is
Mhm.
math. Because the central idea behind the Wheel of Time is that there's this mystical Wheel of Time. It keeps turning, ages come and pass, whatever. And the idea is that the dragon and the Dark One will have an infinite amount of battles, right? Until the final one. And so,
Right.
statistically speaking, if they can fight countless amount of times, the dragon has to be reborn every single time. Well, then mathematically, shouldn't the Dark One win at some point, right?
Hmm.
Even though I do feel like a bunch of the Dark Friends just turn into mindless hordes of not that interesting characters, at least I have an explanation for why they're choosing that side. Does that make
Hmm.
sense? But yeah, so
Yes.
if I'm not given any explanation, I'm like, yeah, it really removes the nuance, doesn't it?
Right, exactly. I think that's a good example of it done well, where it's more of a begrudging sort of devotion. The other examples I thought of were Saruman in Lord of the Rings, where his whole thing is he's not necessarily saying Sauron is a good guy, but he's saying like, look, we are not going to be able to beat him, so we might as well be on the winning side. You also see that with another villain I thought of was Saren from the Mass Effect video games, where it's kind of a similar situation to Wheel of Time, where there's this cyclical threat of these aliens come in and they wipe out civilization every like 50,000 years. And so Saren's ideal is I will align myself with them in the hopes that I can kind of reform them over time so that they
Hmm.
don't continually do this, but he doesn't agree with their ideology. He is joining them thinking that he can have influence over them. And that's a lot more interesting, yeah, than just like the brainwashed followers who do not question anything. Like that can work for like the henchmen, I think, but when you're talking about like the big bads and they're just like, no, we're the true believers and I just don't think it works as well.
Yeah. I actually have an example of, and it's gonna hurt me to say this because I love this
Mm.
trilogy so much, but the first law, and I'm sorry if Joe Abercrombie is watching this. I love everything about your books. I'm gonna lie. Please send me a copy of the Ark of the Devils. I will sell a kidney to get that book. I'm so sorry. Anyways, with that disclaimer out of the way. In the first trilogy, we find out pretty early that there's an invasion happening from the south. It's called from the Gurkish Empire, and they're just shown to be like super, super mega evil. And I'm sure there's some explanation in the lore. I'm sure that he's withholding from us still. At least that's the vibe that I get. But in that entire first trilogy, I'm like, I don't care. I don't
Mm.
believe that everyone, that this entire horde, that this entire huge empire that we really don't learn that much about is a bunch of religious zealots. And I was like, come on, man. Come on, Joe. I had so much faith in you.
That makes
Yeah.
sense. And it's hard.
I,
It's hard to write that because I get the need for like, okay, you need in a lot of stories you need that kind of irredeemably evil force in order to kind of drive up the stakes and drive up the tension. Because like another example I would think of is in Star Wars is probably the most famous example of the Empire. They're all just stormtroopers. They're all just indoctrinated fascist bad guys. But then the TV show Andor does a really good job of showing like, well, maybe not everyone in the Empire believes these things just because they've been brainwashed, but they believe because they genuinely think that they are bringing order to a chaotic galaxy. And that's way more interesting than in the sequels where it's like, they're all just kidnapped as children, so they get brainwashed at birth to believe that fascism is good. It's just like, but that's not usually how it works in real life. Like people come to these conclusions, these ideologies because they think they are good, not usually because of brainwashing.
no, 100%. And I feel like from the writer's point of view, I see how this is it's the easy way out, right? You want your
Mhm.
heroes to be the ones that we as the readers or viewers root for, right?
Mhm.
However, I think it's lazy writing. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
There are good examples of it, but yeah, overall it's something I'm a little tired of, I would say.
yeah, me too.
But what is the next trope you have listed down?
I'm gonna get canceled for this.
Do it.
You know, you know how sometimes people are like, I don't know, when it comes to marketing a book, they're like, this book has dragons, and so you will love it. And so it's super, super cool.
Hmm.
No, I don't care. I'm sick of it. If you market a book to me and you're like, oh, this book is so cool because it has dragons, I'm never gonna read it. I'm sorry, I'm sick of it. It's not that I'm sick of dragons per se. It's just, okay, I have a photo actually that I'd like to
Ooh,
share.
photo
Of
evidence.
I have photo evidence, okay, which single-handedly is going to destroy the cool factor of dragons in books because dragons in books, and all of them, oh, look like this, okay? And so I don't care if there's a dragon in a book because, again, it's gonna look, it's not showing up now. It's gonna look like that. And so if it's a movie, if it's a TV show or whatever, and there's some sort of CGI art, whatever, that has to go into creating this creature, then I'll be like, yeah, wow, I'm really in awe of the animators and the CGI artists, whatever, unless it's what they did with Villain Tread and Mirth of the Dragon and The Witcher, in which case I don't even want to talk about that. But yeah, so I think dragon design, visual, can be super interesting. Jonah Loeb and his work for the dragons in Skyrim. Oh my gosh, amazing. In a book, again, it's just a couple of letters on a page. I don't care. Okay. And so if that's the only thing that's making your book cool, I'm over it. I'm over it. Okay. If you can pitch it to me as, oh, there's this crazy story about this, 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 and this, there happens to be a dragon in there somewhere, I'll be like, great, let me read it. But if your main pitching point is dragons, No.
Yeah, I would say I would agree with you. Because I think the artwork for dragons does a lot of the heavy lifting of kind of getting your imagination going of these really majestic or really terrifying creatures. But at this point, like to me, kind of what you said, it's kind of the equivalent of like saying my fantasy has dragons in it is kind of the equivalent of saying my sci-fi has aliens in it. It's like, well, duh. Like that
Yeah.
is what most of the genre has kind of been dominated by. And again, it's like, okay, but if that's the only thing you got, you got to do something a little more interesting. Give us an angle that is different. Because we've already done the whole Dragon Riders thing plenty of times. We've had evil dragons plenty of times. We've had dragons that are kind of morally gray in the middle. I don't know what else you can do with them. I'm sure there is more you could do, but I can't
I'm
think
sure
of any.
there's stuff. I'm sure there's stuff, there's different dragons from different cultures, and that's great. I want to see that. If that's the only thing that makes your book cool or interesting, I'm sorry to break it to you, buddy. Your book's not that interesting. So I'm sorry to be a hater, but I plead the fifth or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah, what's
the
your next one?
so the next one I have, this is one that goes more from annoyance to I think this legitimately breaks stories. The quote that I have written down is the power was inside of you all along. That whole trope, I think, is it's so bad. Thankfully, I don't think we see it as more as we used to. But the reason that that particular phrase or that idea bugs me so much is to me, it is the laziest kind of character development, where basically what you are saying is that the protagonist's struggle was just they needed to realize that they were special. They didn't think they were special, but now they think they're special, therefore they can do X, Y, and Z beat the big bad. I just think that is so lazy. And I can't stand it.
Um, Also, I want to say the audacity of an author thinking that they'll do it better than My Little Pony did. They were the OGs. The power of friendship, believing in yourself. That's My Little Pony, guys. And they were the best. So you're not going to do it better than them. But I do want to play devil's advocate because have you read Stormlight Archive?
I have not, unfortunately.
Okay, because the entire magic system, wait, this isn't like, I wouldn't consider this spoilers because it's in all the marketing.
I'm
Yeah.
fine with whatever's like a blurb or what you would get from
Yeah,
the
it's on
premise.
all the marketing. So the idea is that there are these knights, mythical knights radiant, right? And there are different oaths that they say. And they really have to come to believe them when they say them, or else they don't get to like progress to the next level
Mm.
of being a knight's radiant. And so, the first oath is always the same, and then it changes as you progress. And so, as you
Ah.
were saying that, that's literally the magic system of Stormlight, but super oversimplified. And
Gotcha. Gotcha.
all the big moments in the series are when a character feels super low and they're like, and then they realize, and they're like, and then they say the thing that they realize about themselves.
Mm.
I won't say what those realizations are because those are heavy spoilers, but they say that realization and they're like, and they go super cyan and they said,
Gotcha.
so I love Stormlight Archive. That's But I think it's done well there. So,
Yeah, that sounds a bit different though, because at least there you have a whole like magic system kind of based around that,
mm,
and it's not like from the way you described it, it's not like the character realizes I'm special and then every conflict from the story is immediately resolved from there on out. Like, no, it's
right.
just like it's one step along their journey
Yeah.
versus like, yeah, the trope of like My Little Pony or whatever, where it's like we just say the thing, all conflict is immediately resolved. We don't, bad guy defeated immediately because power of love and friendship. Like,
Friendship is
I get,
magic.
yeah, I get the message. I'm not saying it's necessarily like a bad moral or something, but just like the hero believing in themselves is a very common, like their need to believe in themselves is a very common trope in fiction, but it needs to be a steady progression in my mind to that point. It can't just be you say the thing and from here on out we're all good.
I agree. And actually, I want to bring up something because I know you're also interested in like movies and things like that.
Mm.
And something that I have an issue with the recent portrayal of female heroes in movies is
Ah,
that a lot of the time it's like, wow, you had the power in you all along. You just had to realize the
yep,
shackles that were put on you by whatever, and you can save the day. Are
yep.
you? I'm sorry. As a woman, I find that offensive. I I want to see my female characters written, that from the ground up. I want to see them struggle, overcome their challenges, and then earn earn that moment of, oh my gosh, look how far I have come. I think that is so much more interesting than just being like, oh no, some outside force is keeping me down. And now, because I girl bossed so hard, I can defeat the bad guy. So, sorry.
No, I am so glad you articulated that. I had actually thought of that as well, and I'm like, do I want to push that angle? But I'm like, no, I'm totally with you because some examples that come to mind of that are the live action version of Mulan does that, which I can't stand because in the original animated it wasn't that way. She really did have to struggle. She really did have to
Amazing movie.
find your way. Great movie. And then that's also why I couldn't get into Captain Marvel either, because that's the whole message of that movie as well. Is like, oh, I just forgot that I had all this power, but now I remember I have all this power, so I can blow up all the bad guys.
Yeah. And you know what's sad? Because I actually really liked Captain Marvel back in the day.
Mm.
I back when I was like 10, I wanted to be an Air Force pilot because of her. And
Aw.
yeah, and I found her story in the comics originally to be so beautiful. So
Mm.
beautiful. It almost kind of like Beauty and the Beast even because are you familiar with the backstory or can I do a little
Well, go
tangent?
go right ahead because I haven't gone that deep into that character in the comics, so.
So the entire point was, and now I might be misremembering some things, so but the point was that you had this guy, Marvel, he was the Kree, and he came down to Earth. He was supposed to, like destroy Earth or whatever. But then he fell in love with her, and
Mm.
she showed him this other side of humanity, and slowly over time she showed him that Earth shouldn't be destroyed, that there's power and there's love and there's art, there's compassion, and humanity can be so beautiful, and she showed that to him because he fell in love with her. And then the other guy, Jan Rog, comes down. So that would be Jude Law's character. He
Right.
comes down and he's like, Marvel, we're destroying Earth or whatever. And so he wants to use that device. I forgot what the name was of the device. It wasn't the Tesseract in the comics. It was something else. I don't remember what it was called. But essentially, the way she gets her powers is because Yon-Rogg explodes the device, and Marvel is there, and he saves her. And so the blast,
Oh.
because he's like, oh, I'm gonna care more. Like I'm gonna save her instead of going after him because like I care for her so much. Um, he saves her, and I think the blast kind of makes his DNA imprint onto her, which then causes her to start kind of shifting between her Carol Danvers and Miss Marvel persona, where when she is initially Miss Marvel, she doesn't remember that she's Carol Danvers. So that's where they got the memory loss thing, but literally, they didn't have to do that. And I thought that was such a beautiful story. Belle, Beauty and the Beast, that's my favorite Disney princess. And so Miss Marvel in my head is kind of similar, the entire
Mm.
idea of, she turns him from this beast into a person who can, make a different choice and grow and be better. And I don't I thought that was such a beautiful story, and it would have been different than so many of the other Marvel heroes up until that
Hmm.
point, where it is about them finding their own strength. And but here, she helps. Do you know what I mean? Am I making sense?
Yes. No, that makes
Yeah, and I
perfect
loved
sense
that story.
because that
So I'm just
that
sad that it wasn't
already
good enough.
right. That already sounds way more compelling than the movie we got. I had no idea that that was the backstory of the character in the
Yeah.
comics, and maybe this will be an extra trope for bonus because there seems to be this weird sort of stigma right now, especially in Hollywood, against having like female characters really tied to a male character because they are scared, I guess, that that would be less empowering. But like you described,
Yeah.
the whole point of the story is that no, she changes him. Like he was in this incorrect worldview, and it is her goodness, her humanity, her love
Mm,
that kind of causes him to shift his perspective. And so
yeah.
it's just strange the
Yeah,
decisions that they made.
and I don't think that that's, saying that, oh, women can only be heroes, I don't know, for men, whatever. But I
Right,
think that,
exactly.
but something that I kind of think is that too often, um, too often we see female superheroes just be given masculine traits, and then it's like, oh, now she's empowered. Sure,
Right.
there is space for that. There is space for that, sure.
Hmm.
But I don't think that should be the only way a woman is empowered. I
Certainly.
I want to see my, muscle mommy girl bosses, but I also but I also want to see my like compassionate, um,
Hmm.
loving women that, that have these like more traditional like feminine traits, and that those are
Exactly.
also good. And hey, she does become a superhero by the end of the day. She does.
Yeah.
And they could have done something different, that that in the blast she gets the power, and then together she is the final one that destroys Yonrog or something like that. They could have done something
Hmm.
like that, and it still would have been like, go girl boss. I support my girl bosses. But I don't think the only way a woman can be powerful if is down with the
Right.
men. I don't think that's the only.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you. I would think a good positive example of what you described is Arwen from Lord of the Rings, where she does
Yeah.
have moments where, she gets to ride the horse and do some smack talk with the ring race, but she also is still very graceful and very much they put her kind of more traditional femininity, if you will, kind of front and center, but that's not portrayed as a bad thing. And
Yeah.
kind of doing the inverse too. I never looked at Aragorn and thought, wow, you're not a very empowering man because you have this special connection to a woman and that's your motivation. I was like, oh, it makes sense for his character, and there's something very noble about he's going on all these dangerous things because he's thinking of her, because he wants to get back to her, and he's struggling with all of that. And so I would say that as a good positive example of, yeah, just because a female character is not, yeah, always punching bad guys or girl bossing does not inherently mean that they are a bad character, does not mean that they can't be empowering through, who they are as a person.
Yeah. And again, it's not that I'm saying that women can't, be the, punching bad guys, blah, blah, blah. Because there is definitely space for that as well. And,
Hmm.
I love watching, female fight scenes. But I just think that too often nowadays it's done wrong. I think
Hmm.
that Emily Blunt in Edge of Tomorrow is a good example
Oh,
of, she in the mech suit, and I'm like, yeah, let's go. She's so
that's
cool.
a good
But
example.
yeah, and I'm like, yes, if this is how we're gonna have this done, more of this. But then we get what they did to my Captain Marvel, and
Mm.
then I'm like, come on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I think we've established, yeah, there's space for both because I mean, we could go on all day, so I'll move us on
yeah.
here soon. But the other one that comes to mind is Wonder Woman. I think is a good example of the opposite of she is
Yeah.
very muscular, she is a very good fighter, but she doesn't have to put down the men around her in order to seem like powerful force. She just is because we see her
Yeah.
kick those Germans' butt, and we know that
Yeah.
she is she is powerful. I'm referring
Yeah,
to the
that
first
first Wonder
movie.
Woman movie was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And there you go. It goes to show you can do it well. So,
Anyways.
well, yeah, you got an extra one in there, folks. Congratulations. But what is the other one that you had written down?
So my next one is also just an annoyance, and it's when authors don't use proper grammar. Of
Oh,
course, we could get into a discussion into what is proper grammar, but I don't think I'm smart enough for that. But so I recently read a beautiful book that won the Booker Prize. I can't see. Oh, here it is. Paul Lynch is my public enemy number one. I'm so sorry. Half of these sentences aren't sentences. It is all written in blocks of text. There's no paragraph breaks. Sometimes he doesn't even do a paragraph break when people start talking.
oh no.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? So yeah, I'm a hater when that happens. It can be done well. I think the way Sally Rooney and Cormac McCarthy do it makes sense because you can still find yourself. Absolutely not.
Yeah, that I can see how that would be annoying because that it also just from a formatting perspective, this is more aesthetically, it makes it look more like a textbook when you write it like that. It doesn't even look like a novel at that point. It doesn't there's just something I think psychologically in our brain that looks at that and is just like, that's wrong. That that doesn't look right.
No, definitely. And it's just annoying because you have this entire block of text. You lose yourself constantly, constantly. If that's and some people say, oh, but it's the artistic choice, blah, 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 because the character is lost. And so they want you to feel lost. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. I want to know what I'm reading. Sorry, sue me.
Yeah, it's like, well,
Yeah.
you can make that artistic choice, but doesn't mean I have to like it. I'm sorry. Maybe
Yeah.
it works for some people, but yeah, no, don't give me that big block of text. No, thank you.
No, no, thank you. Grammar was invented for a reason.
Yes.
Anyways, uh,
Yes. Yes, when I
anyways,
read your
what's
book,
your next one? Oh, sorry.
uh, I was just gonna say when I read your book, I don't want to feel like I'm reading a textbook. I want to feel like I'm reading fiction, a novel, please.
Yes.
But the next one I've written down, this is kind of an interesting one because I haven't heard this one talked about a lot. It's villains with a fake motivation. To kind of explain what I mean, I've seen a couple different stories where you have a bad guy who's set up, and they are set up in a way of like their motivation is like, let's just. Oh, here, I'll give this example of Bane from the Dark Knight Rises movie. His whole motivation in the beginning of the movie seems to be, I want to tear down all the power structures in Gotham, poor eat the rich, kind of upend the whole system because this is corrupt, almost this kind of Marxist kind of idea. But then it's revealed at the end of the movie that that wasn't really his motivation. That was just a front for his real motivation was just to get revenge for the death of Ra's al Ghul. And the reason I bring this up is because I think when you give a villain a fake motivation that is covering for a real one, it just makes them so much less interesting in my mind because to me a character is more interesting when they are self-motivated and there's a core belief that they hold very strongly that motivates them to do what they want to do rather than I'm going to put on this facade of what I want to do, but in reality, here's what I really want to do. I've rarely seen that done in a way that's compelling. Does that make sense? I know that's kind of a weird one, but
Yeah, no, I actually never thought of that, but yeah, no, I get it. I think sometimes it can be done well. I'm thinking Mistborn. I don't know.
hmm.
But yeah, I feel like too often that's done as a kind of gotcha moment. So again, I feel like it's cheating the reader out of genuine emotion because again, I think it's just such a lazy writing tactic of, we're setting up this villain, blah, 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 but haha, gotcha, actually, plot twist. This isn't what they were about this entire time. I'm like, okay. Luckily, I don't think I've seen it done in too many of the things that I have read. So I'm so
Hmm.
sorry that was your experience.
Yeah, yeah. It's okay. Because the other example that I think of, have you seen Avatar: The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra, those shows? No?
No.
No, no.
I know, I'm gonna get canceled again.
Oh no, it's okay. We're already there, so might as well keep digging the hole. But no, you should
Might
definitely
as
watch
well.
those shows. So without spoiling it, then in the sequel show Legend of Korra in the first season, there's a villain who starts off very compelling because they have this whole kind of altruistic motivation of like, I want to get rid of basically all magic because I believe that magic causes conflict. And you're like, oh, that's kind of
Mm,
an interesting motivation. But then it's revealed later on that no, it was actually a personal vendetta that he had. It wasn't really, that was just a facade and that he was a
yeah.
phony. And it's just like, that's so much less interesting. Like it was so much more interesting when he had this ideology that you're like, oh, this presents an interesting contrast to our hero because we've been told that magic is a good thing, but this guy is saying it's a bad thing. It's like, ah, but no, we can't have that.
Yeah, and actually, what you touched upon with the ideology aspect of conflicting ideologies kind of driving character motivation, character growth, plot, that's what I love. That, like, my favorite books always explore some sort of interesting ideological question, uh, make you think, yeah, man, I'm so sorry that that happened in Legend of Korra. Because
Uh,
what you said sounded so much more interesting. Because again, I don't know a lot, but I mean, I don't live under a rock, so I know a little bit. But in Avatar, the first one, right?
mhm.
It's that the Fire Nation invades or something,
Yes,
and that
yes.
there's the powers and war, conflict, and so I think it's such an interesting premise for in the sequel to be for someone to rise up and say, okay, well, clearly powers and magic have caused us so much suffering. They're
Hmm.
the problem. That would have been so interesting.
Yeah, but we can't have that. We can't have
Oh,
interesting things. It's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
Maybe we'll get less of that, I hope.
Yeah.
But that's about all I had for that one. What was the next trope you had listed down?
Yeah. See, I feel like mine are so bad and compared to yours because my next one is also kind of superficial. But something that really annoys me is when a story has a fairy tale like tone.
Hmm.
So an example that I can think of is The Eyes of the Dragon by Stephen King. Uh,
Hmm.
for example, I didn't dislike that book, but I just and I know that he was aiming to write like a story for his daughter and stuff like that. And I get it. He did it well, I think. For me personally, whenever something is written in this very lyrical fairy tale style, it feels almost unreal, and not unreal as in, oh, this was unreal. It was amazing. It just feels not honest, not
Hmm.
truthful. Like the stakes aren't there because it's cozy and fairy tale. And that's why I'm very, even though I want to jump on the hype train of, uh, oh, I don't remember his first name, Travis Baldree. Is that him? Who
That
wrote
sounds
Legends and
right.
Lattes?
Right,
Right?
right.
I really want to jump on that train, but I'm so scared that I won't like those books because
Hmm.
they're marketed as being cozy and everything. And
Right.
so, yeah, I don't like that. I think that the one exception where I think the fairy tale tone added to the story that I can think of is Tress of the Emerald Sea,
Hmm.
because but the twist on that there is that there's a third character that you get to know throughout Brandon Sanderson's work. His name is Hoyd. He's kind of like a jester, storyteller type character. And he's telling someone the story of this girl that he met on a faraway planet where the seas are green and made out of spores. And so it suits, I think, I think it suits, and also I think Hoyd is quite funny. So
Hmm.
because it was him narrating it, I still felt like the stakes were a bit lower, but because it was this character that I already knew narrating it, I was like, okay. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And it's funny because I actually thought of Tress when you said that, because I have read that
Mm,
one, and here's where I'm gonna get canceled because Tress was my introduction to the Cosmere. A lot of people say that you shouldn't read Tress first, but I read it first and I still loved it. I gave it five
really?
stars. I thought it was a very solid introduction for me as this kind of cool side story. But because I think what you said is right, that that book does a good job of like it's very self-aware. I think
Yeah,
that's one of the keys too. It is very kind of lighthearted, low stakes, but it has a lot of fun with it and it really kind of plays into that. And it's funny
definitely.
with the fairy tale tone, by contrast, that's why I also haven't been able to get into grimdark quite as much to because to me that's the opposite extreme, where it's like things are so dark, things are so depressing that I have a hard time getting invested. And so it's kind of those two opposite extreme ends of the spectrum where it's like if it's too light, then some people will have a hard time getting invested because it just feels like there are no stakes and it's a little too fluffy. But if it's also super grim dark, that does put some people off because it's like, man, who am I supposed to root for if everybody is just a terrible person? Then how do I get
Hmm.
invested? So I think that that's an interesting one. I hadn't thought of that.
It's interesting that you brought up grimdark, and I haven't read a lot of grimdark. Some people would consider The Witcher grimdark. I personally don't, but
I
a lot
don't
of
think
people
it is.
considered. Yeah, I don't think it
Just
is. But have you
from
read
the
any of them?
Witcher stuff, I've read a little bit of the books and I've played the video game and I watched the Netflix show. But
Sorry.
we don't have to get into all that. But
You just triggered my PTSD.
I would
Sorry.
argue that Witcher is not grimdark because there is still that heroic through line there. There is still like and it's also Geralt is not the only like good character morally. Like there are other characters around him that are also good. And so I wouldn't say that it's grimdark. It's very violent and it's
Hmm.
definitely like has a harder edge than a lot of other fantasy, but I don't think I'd say it's grimdark personally.
Yeah, I wanted to just quickly defend Joe Abercrombie here. So, maybe this is my redemption. If you're
There we
watching
go.
this, here we go. I'll be waiting for that devil's arc in my post box. Anyways,
You heard it
I
here,
think
folks.
you heard it here first. Um, for me, again, I haven't read a lot of Grimdark, but he is considered, the king of Grimdark. And I thought that it would all just be super nihilistic, everyone sucks, no moments of levity, blah, blah, blah. But I really thought that it wasn't nihilistic.
Mm,
I thought that it kind of comes to it approaches life with if these were real people, how would they really act?
mm,
What would their character motivations, where would they clash? And that's where the conflict is born from, especially in his Age of Madness trilogy, which is I cannot believe that a human is able to produce a body of art like Age of Madness. It's amazing. And it's all about finding hope in the darkest moments because if everything is so light and fluffy and easy, well, what's the point in finding hope? It's easy,
mm,
Hope in the darkest times. Now that's truly valuable, I think.
mm.
And so I think that even if you don't want to try grimdark, in my humble opinion, Joe Abercrombie still does this very well. So
Nice. I think you made a pretty good pitch, pretty good defense there. And yeah, kind of
thank you.
bringing it back to, the whole discussion of tone. And what you said about of fairy tales too. I think it really all depends on how you write it.
Yeah.
And because like a positive example for me of that would be The Princess Bride, where that has a very light, kind of fluffy kind of tone to it, but it does still have dark moments. It does still have stakes. I wouldn't necessarily call it cozy. And maybe I'm
Yeah.
mischaracterizing it because I haven't read what a lot of quote unquote cozy fantasy But I think
Mm,
as long as your story has stakes and you do feel some sense of danger for the characters, and investment in their arcs, then you're golden.
definitely. It's like the yin and yang, where
Mm.
if the story is dark, it has to have moments of levity. And if a
Mhm.
story is light and fluffy and cozy, well, you still have to ensure that the stakes are being felt. Yeah. Anyways, what's your next one?
So the next one I had written down, this one annoys me a lot, and I think does break a lot of stories. What I wrote down is character resurrections without explanation.
That was gonna be my next one.
Ah, there we go. Well, now we've evened it out
There we
because we kind of
go.
added
Now
in
we
an
evened it
extra
out.
one, and so now, so okay, let's talk about
It
this.
was meant to be
So
Thomas,
it was meant to be perfectly balanced as all things
as
should
all
be.
things should be.
But I think the big reason this bugs me so much is because to me it ruins stakes. When characters can be resurrected, whether they're a hero or a villain, the whole, you may not know, but in Star Wars, the whole infamous somehow Palpatine returned. It's like you're just admitting that you don't know how this happened. You're just doing this because you couldn't find a new villain. And so you're like, he's back. And it just completely undermines the work of the heroes. It undermines the stakes of the story. I'm sure you have a lot to say on this as well. What do you think?
No, no, Thomas, you're so wrong about Star Wars. Don't you know that they had the best motivation for Palpatine returning? Cash grab, right? It's
Always a
the
good
best
motivator. The almighty dollar is a powerful thing.
one. I mean, duh. No, okay, so for me, I feel like rebirths in select situations can be done well.
Mhm.
Gandalf. However, however, it has to be set up well. You know, it has to be something where you, as the reader, understand in what situations people stay dead and in what situations there can be a return.
Mhm.
Because if just your random Joe from down the street can be reborn tomorrow, sorry, that's no. And if rebirths are too commonplace, like I read Gardens of the Moon first recently, and I was really confused about the magic, and there was a lot of like gods meddling in humanly affairs, and and at a point I was kind of like, okay, well, is this just like an your everyday Tuesday? You know what I mean? And I wanted to bring this up because Brandon Sanderson, again, if you're watching Brando Sando, huge fan, huge fan. Um, he has a tendency to do rebirths. I won't bring
Mm.
up when, but we are building up to the release of Stormlight 5, and I love Stormlight Archive. I love that series, and I have this terrible, I don't know, I have this doom feeling that there's going to be rebirths in that one as well.
Mm.
And or fake out deaths where it's not even that it's a rebirth, it just, oh, this person died or a boulder crashed into them, and then 5 chapters later, here they are again. And I'm like, you know, I feel like it cheats I feel like it cheats the reader out of genuine emotions, and
Yeah.
it not only that, it then lowers the stakes for every next character death because you have this
Yes.
question, well, it happened with Timmy over here. Can't it happen with Tommy? You know what I mean? So, yeah. What were your thoughts?
No, I'm totally with you. I think it's funny because I also thought of Gandalf as like the one positive example of it done well. And I think the reason that one works for me is because it doesn't feel like Tolkien was scratching his head like, oh, how do I bring this character back in the story to have more stakes? No, it serves a purpose in the narrative beyond just this is a fan favorite character that we want to bring back. And also with, I think everybody knows the end of the Lord of the Rings, but spoilers if you haven't. But Gandalf eventually does go into the West. He does return to death effectively. So it's not like he came back and now he just lives his best life for the rest of his life. Like, no, he came back for a specific purpose, and then once that purpose was fulfilled, he was gone. And I won't say who in case people don't know who I'm talking about, but that's one of the things why Game of Thrones wasn't investing for me at a certain point, is because when you introduce character resurrection into a story that so fundamentally for the first, in the show, the first few seasons were all about like, no, this person died. Like they are not coming back. Like if someone dies, they stay dead. And then when you introduce the resurrection of this one specific character, it's like, well, then who else can come back? If that seems to undermine the entire point of that story, in my personal opinion. I don't know if that will happen in the books, but that's just my opinion on that.
Yeah, and I also am kind of curious, why does Gandalf work other than the fact that, he goes
Right.
back to the West? I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't read The Lord of the Rings yet. I watched the movies many a time. I love the movies. I know, I'm just getting myself canceled,
It's
Anyways,
okay. I haven't
um
read all of the books myself. I read like one and a half of them. So there we go. Solidarity.
I feel so much better. I feel so much better. But for me, it's like I'm pretty sure that Gandalf isn't just another mortal character, that he's
Yes,
one
there
of
is
the
that as well.
right. And
The
so
Iluvatar, I think they're called. Like kind of angelic type
yeah.
beings in the Lord of the
Yeah.
Rings universe.
Yeah, and so for me, that is already, he's not human.
Hmm.
If I'm okay with someone like Gandalf coming back, especially the way he does, I wouldn't be okay with Boromir coming back. I
Right,
feel like that would
exactly.
be a big difference. So,
That's a good point. Yeah, there is also an in-universe explanation that feels earned. Which
yeah, it's
again,
not
I
just everyone.
yes, it's not everyone, and I hate to bring it back to Star Wars again, but again, in Rise of Skywalker, there's even a line where they say like, "How is he back?" and someone says, "Cloning, dark side magic, secrets only the Sith knew." And it's like, that's not an explanation. You just gave me three possible explanations and just basically said, "I don't know, you pick whichever one makes the most sense to you." Ugh,
Yeah.
but
I'm curious if Film Theory made a video about this because if they did, I need to watch it. It
yeah,
was like,
that
which of the three, that would be cool.
yeah. I mean that movie you could dissect in a million different ways, which I will not do here, but suffice it to say, if you're going to resurrect characters, there needs to be a very good reason. I think is what we've established. There needs to be a very clear reason. It needs to feel earned. It needs to feel like it fits within the context of the universe. Otherwise, it completely undermines the stakes of a story.
100%. Anyways, Thomas, if that's all that we want to say, since you stole my last one, it's okay. I forgive you. I forgive you.
Ah.
What's your last one?
So the last one that I had written down, and this one is maybe my number one, just because it drives me up the wall so much. When characters are in a romantic relationship in a, let's say you've got book one or movie one, we spend that whole movie, that whole book, characters don't like each other, become romantically involved at the end, and you're like, yay, love triumphs, cool. And then the sequel comes out. And then the first page, oh yeah, we broke up off screen. We broke up off page. That drives me up the wall because it completely undercuts our emotional investment from the first book or the first movie. And it just resets the characters back to their original starting point. I guess I don't know why, because we can't come up with anything new.
No, that's exactly it. The author's like, well, this worked the first time. Let's do it. No, I haven't read Fourth Wing because I
Hmm.
just don't think that I'll be too interested in it. It also has animal companions. Sorry. Bringing it full circle. But I haven't read it and I don't think I will. But I am chronically online, so I like to be in the know with what's happening. And I heard that a big problem that people had with Iron Flame, which was book two, was that
Hmm.
that's exactly what the author did. That she's that they saw how successful the enemies to lovers thing was, and they were like, perfect, let's do that again. And so people were frustrated.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand from a marketing decision, of course, why that makes sense of like, hey, first book or the first movie sold really well, so we need to replicate that. But then the problem is that it makes it feel like the first installment was just all for nothing. It's like
Yeah.
we're just going in circles for the sake of creating more drama. And I don't know why we don't have more stories where it, couples go through things together. Like to me, that's
Yeah.
more reflective of real life. Like most people don't break up the second things get difficult. Like they go through things together, they endure things together. Maybe they don't come out the other side together, perhaps. But let me see that journey. Don't let
Yeah.
that happen off screen or off page where I just have to fill in the blanks about what happened to cause all of this chaos.
Definitely. What's the worst offender in your opinion?
Ooh, so there's actually a number of examples that I wrote down. The Jurassic Park movies do this a couple of times, which is very frustrating. Indiana Jones does this a little bit, which I find frustrating. I think the biggest offender though has got to be comic books. The superhero media in general does this a lot, where like
Yeah.
Spider-Man and Mary Jane, they're together. They finally figured it out, and then it's like, oh no, being Spider-Man is too hard. We got to break up. Or another big offender, Superman and Lois Lane, constantly breaking
Mm.
up and getting back together throughout the comics. And it's like, why can't we have these classic, like famous comic book couples just stay together and figure out how do you do the whole superhero thing also with marriage slash romantic relationship thing? That is more interesting than just like, I can't be with you because I am superhero and you would get in the way. I'm just kind of
Yeah.
over that particular cliche.
Yeah, and I actually think that there was like a controversy a couple years back because Storm and Black Panther were divorced or something.
Mm.
And
Yeah, what?
I don't remember the specifics exactly, but I remember seeing that that's like a huge controversy because they were such a like fan favorite
Mm-hmm.
couple. And so seeing them getting divorced for like what reason, people were not really happy with that. So,
There is a very infamous Spider-Man comic. I think it's called like Day One, something like that. Someone is going to correct me, but there's a very infamous Spider-Man comic where he, fans hate it because basically what happens is Spider-Man has to make a deal with the devil that he has to stay broken up with Mary Jane. Otherwise, if they're together, then some horrible curse or thing is going to happen to her. And and again, it's just one of those extreme examples of like introducing the most contrived plot element to keep these two characters separated. It's like even the devil himself wants to keep Spider-Man and Mary Jane from being together. It's like, why? Why are we doing this?
cash grab.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the best reason to do anything, Thomas. I'm telling you right now. Yeah,
It's
cash
certainly
grab.
a lot of people seem to think so, definitely. And honestly, I feel like that could apply to a lot of the tropes that we talked about, where it's just to keep
Yeah.
the drama going, it's to extend a storyline that already concluded, reintroduce fan favorite characters in order to increase engagement and marketability, but it doesn't make for compelling storytelling at the end of the day.
Yeah. I think that's a big thing, you know? We don't want these superficial things, you know? We want it to mean something, you know,
Mhm.
because you can dress something, you know, you can dress a package up in all these different things that on paper are amazing, you know. You can put a little bow on the package, wrap it up in a, I don't know, cute little piece of paper with an intricate design, whatever. But if what you find inside is empty, it's if there's nothing inside, well, you're not going to be happy to receive the package no matter what it looks like, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense. I sometimes give really weird analogies. So
No, I think that makes perfect sense. And I'll conclude with this on this trope, which is the one positive example that I can think of is in the Dark Knight movies. Have you seen those?
I have, yeah.
So in the first one, Batman Begins, we have, Rachel and Batman kind of get together, but then in The Dark Knight, she's with Harvey and he's doing his Batman thing. But I think the reason that that one doesn't bug me as much is because to me that ties into the whole theme of Batman, which is that his crusade is ultimately self-destructive, that he
Mm,
is sabotaging his personal life time and time again for the sake of this vow that he made for the sake of this mission. And throughout that movie, you see that Rachel herself is even very conflicted about her feelings between Harvey and Bruce. And Bruce still has feelings for Rachel, but he is also in love with his crusade as well.
yeah.
And so that to me, again, that ties into the theme of that whole movie. It's about him sacrificing all of these different things for the sake of his mission. And so that's the one example I can think of it being done well, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd say another one, just I have to bring up my boy Sapkowski here. The Witcher. I
Mm,
think that I don't want to get into this too much, but Geralt and Yen have a very turbulent relationship up until
mhm,
well, they do have a turbulent relationship up until a point, especially. And then there's kind of a rehash of that in the games, but the explanation they give makes sense. But I feel like for them, it makes sense because
mhm,
I think it's the miscommunication trope done well. And I think that it's that idea of they keep breaking up, they keep getting together, but I think it's always done well, and
mhm,
there's always an explanation. And then when Siri is introduced, finally things start getting resolved. And when they
mhm,
do start getting resolved and you see how much they do care for each other and how so much of it was just the things that they were too afraid to say. I love their love story. I love their
mhm.
love story. So, yeah.
I think that's a good note to end on is that if it ties into the overall theme of the story, then then it's acceptable. Then if that's the point, is then it works. It may be a
It
very blunt
works.
way of putting it, but there we go.
In the words of my man Todd Howard, it just works.
And one of the great things about having a fully dynamic game engine is all of this just works. It's not, I'm not kidding. The generators will power things through switches that require power, lights and other items, and then you run wires that connect them all, and again, it just works.
So those are the tropes that we find most annoying in science fiction and fantasy. I think that's all that I had. That's all that you had too, right?
Yeah, because someone stole mine. So,
Yeah, that
no,
is
thank you
true.
so much for inviting me, and I really enjoyed our discussion.
Yes, thanks for coming on. It was good to collab. And you guys down in the comments, so let us know which tropes that you think are very annoying, and if you agree or disagree with the ones that we brought up. I'm sure we would both be curious to see. But with all that being said, thank you again for coming on, Vera. This was a lot of fun, and maybe we could do some more stuff in the future. Who knows?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, that's all I have for today. So I'll see y'all in the next video.